My name is Kevin Becker, and I'm one of the trainers at Raytex. So the navigation for the entire system is the same for all of the modules except for POS. POS has a different navigation system, so that'll be the very ending sessions that we do. But the navigation that I'm going to show you now is common throughout all of the modules. And as you can see, they're even listed across the top of the screen. So let's talk about first about how our customers log in. So each customer has an executable on their system. It's a small little piece of, it's a small little application. This application contains all of the screens, all of the images, the colors, and so on are all in this application. And that's so that when we're actually doing the data transfer back and forth, we're not sending images or graphics, we're only sending the data. So what that means is if a screen changes, we need to have a new executable. So there's typically a new executable with each upgrade. The executable, basically they would put in their username and their password, and then they would hit login. And what that's going to do is it's going to make communication with the server. And if it doesn't make communication, it would say down here at the bottom what the issue is. When a user is done, they can hit log out to log out of the system. But if I hit log in, that's going to make a connection to the server. This is a little extra step that we have in the office. And this is the main screen. Okay, at this point, you've got 4 ways to navigate the main screen. You can use point and click. So just standard mouse navigation. You follow the path that you want to go. So for instance, if I wanted to go to text inquiry, text inquiry book, I just follow the path, click on it, and now I'm at inquiry book. To get out of a screen is just, you've got 2 options. You can do escape, which takes you out, or you can use the X in the upper left-hand portion of the screen. Typically, people use the escape key. In our system, the escape key is how you get out of a screen, and the F10 screen is how you save things. So we've got that option there. I'm just going to close this up. Okay, so if I hit escape, I'm back out. So I could go into the next screen now. So you always come back to what we call our splash screen. This can be minimized to a point like that if you want to, but it doesn't change how the next screen opens up. The next screen always opens up to full screen. When it was originally designed, it was designed to be a full screen app, even though you can switch between other apps while you're using it. You can have 2 visual Raytex screens open or more, depending on how many licenses you have. But you'll notice when you minimize it, that it doesn't really minimize like a standard Windows does. So it can be problematic sometimes for users because they'll forget that they've got a record locked in another screen and so on. The second way to navigate this screen is to use what we call accelerator keys. If you press and release the Alt key on the left side of the space bar, you'll now notice that each one of these words has a letter underlined. So if I wanted to go to GM, I could do G, maintenance, M, and then S for SKU, and that would take me into that screen. So every option, and you don't have to actually wait for it to catch up to you. So if you knew you wanted to go to trade order entry, you can just do DOMP, and it takes you to pending order entry. So you can get there pretty quick. A lot of our schools that are used to using the shortcuts will actually even refer to the screens by their shortcut name. So for instance, the trade inquiry book screen is Alt-TIB, so they'll refer to it as the TIB screen. Just kind of ends up that way. Now, obviously, trade and text both begin with T, so they both can't have the T. So R is used by receiving, A is used by accounting, so trade in our system ended up getting the D. So any of the trade menus are under D. The third way to navigate this main screen is to once again press and release the Alt key on the left of the space bar. And now you can use the arrow keys. I'm just arrowing to the right, arrowing down, arrowing to the right, arrowing down, arrowing to the right. So, and then once you get to the item that you want, you can just hit return, and it will bring up that screen. So it really just depends on if the user is more of a keyboarder or more of a mouse person. You can navigate it either way, and you can do any combination of them as well. So maybe I knew that it was in the accounting menu, so I used my mouse to get to the stock ledger menu, but then at this point I want to use the arrow keys to sort of step through each of the options, and then you can hit enter. So you can use any combination of those three. The fourth way to navigate the screen is to technically not even use the screen at all, and that is to create what we call hotkeys. So up here at the top, there's an HK. The HK allows you to create your top functions that you use. Actually, it shows your top 30 functions. And basically what you can do is any report in the system, any screen in the system, any process in the system can be set up here. And what's nice about this is, most of the things you do in the day are, sort of repetitive tasks. So you could certainly get most of your tasks in the top 30. But what you can do is if you click on textbook inquiry here, it's going to take you right to textbook inquiry. But when you escape, when you're done or you save it, it takes you right back to this menu. So this menu here becomes your desktop instead of our main splash screen. And users can set this up themselves. They can choose what screens they want to have in there, and they can rename them. So if I go to my menu, my settings, these are the hotkeys down below here. So if I wanted this to, say textbook lookup instead of inquiry, you can just change the name of it. And I've seen, folks that will, put reminders here, like if this was an end of month report, buyer report run at the end of the month or something along those lines. So these are all different things that you can do. And then what you have is when you want to add one, so in our system to add a line to any sort of grid, you can use this plus that's up at the top to start a new line, or you can use F4. When you do F4, it adds new lines, so now there's a blank line. And then you can double click or F9 on that empty space to get a list of all of the screens and all of the reports. So the user would have already written down what the name of the screen was or the report was, and then all they need to do is select it from the list. It does take a little while for this to build because there is so much, and I'm running over the network VPN. So this is a list of all of our screens, all of the reports, and this is even user reports as well. So if a user created their own report, they would be able to add it. So you can just choose the item, it puts it in there, and then you can rename it however you want to name it. Okay, so that's navigating the screen and logging in. the next thing is let's take a look at one of the screens just to see what the navigation within the screen looks like, just as an example. So if I go to GM Maintenance Vendor, and I could have done the keyboard shortcuts there as well. So here we have a sample of the screen where we have an area in green surrounded by an area in blue. In order to fill in the detail of the area in blue, we need to put in our vendor. Now at this point, when it's asking for vendor, we can put in the vendor number if you know it, or vendor name or vendor alpha. You can even do a portion of it. You know, so if I did, yeah, CO is a skip word. Just MAN, for instance, and that's going to show things that match that and their number, and you could just select it from the list. If you knew the number, you could search for it. I'm going to go ahead and do Douglas Stewart as a sample, and you can just collect it from the list. Now, once you've selected it up here, then it fills in the information down below, and these are all the fields that you can now edit. This is a point and click environment, so obviously if I wanted to go fill in email, I could. I can click to any of the fields and edit them. Fields that have asterisks on them are required fields and have to be filled in order to save a record. We can, if a school wants a particular field to be required, we can make it required without any software adjustments. But we can't, if it's a required field, we can't make it non-required. It has to stay as a required field. Besides the point and click navigation, the standard navigation is tabbing. Tab takes you from one field to the next. And Shift tab takes you back a field. And you can see the yellow is showing where I'm at for an editable field. So you can use tab and Shift tab, or you can use the mouse. We can also move from sections using the mouse or keyboard shortcuts as well. So you can see the first tab here is order information, return information, remittance information, rep, customer, pending. So we can see various information about an item. You can also do that by doing shortcut keys. So I can do F8. F8 moves me forward one tab. F7 moves me back one tab. So you can navigate that way. So that you can use those to move around the screen. On the screen, we've got drop-down boxes. We use drop-down boxes or combo boxes, as they're sometimes called, anytime we've got a code file in the background. So we've got a code file called vendor type. So they have to choose from that. You know, just like we've got order method, you know, the states and provinces, how it's shipped, and so on. So if there's a code file, we're going to have a drop-down box to make sure that they can only use that. Now, if you know the value, you could go ahead and just type it. So if I knew this was a US publisher, I could type UP, or I could do a V if I knew it was vendor, or you can use the arrow keys, or you can use the mouse. So any combination of those you can set up in the system. The issued serialized products and the tag flag, these are what we call radio buttons, or what the industry calls radio buttons. So if you've got one or the other, so here I'm checking no, here I'm checking yes, you can see it unchecks the other. So you can't have more than one checked. We do have a few places in the system where there's a choice of 3 items or a choice of 4 items, but most of them are binary choices like this. Web address, this is a formatted field. If we put something in here, and you F9 or double click on it, it will take you to that website. And if you've got email address in here and you double click on it, it will open in your email editor. So you have that. You also have the ability to have information more than the field. So typically, a URL is going to be really long, and that's okay. So it can go on to the next field, and what you'll see is typically if it's in a grid or something, you'll see little ellipses there showing that there's additional information. But you can take any field and do F2, or you can click on this icon of the binoculars, and it will take that field and open it up. So essentially in our system, with the exception of control files where you have to choose from a code file, there is no limitation to how large the field can be. So there's no limitation to an author or a title or a comment or any of those things. You can have an unlimited amount. And for instance, if I look at my comments here, and I'm going to copy this, you can use your standard cut, copy, and paste. So you can use the edit function up here. You can use Control X, C, V, or you can right click to get at those as well. So you've got all of your standard cut, copy, paste functions from the Windows world. You can do Control Z as well. I don't know if you saw that in the edit here for undo. This will undo while you're in a particular cell. Once you leave that cell, you start the undo over. So it's not like Word where you can go back and undo your last 200 functions. This is just while you're in a cell. So I'm going to copy, copy and paste this. So what I'm doing here is I'm just adding a test message. Now, what you'll see is that once I went past the screen, it created a scroll bar. So I've now got multiple lines of data. So if I wanted to see it all, I can do F2, that zooms that field. And what I could do now is I can edit in here just as well as read, and I can go ahead and put as much information as I want. And now I'm already on, several pages of information within the comment field. So this is pretty common. People, every time they call a particular vendor for an issue, will add a comment to the vendor comments, like I called so-and-so and spoke to so-and-so. So typically what we tell people is, since comments don't have to be deleted or expire or whatever, is to make sure that you put a date and the username on the comment so that there's a history of who actually created the comment. So once again, that's not just for comment fields, it's for any of the other fields as well. So if I wanted to zoom on the title of the vendor, I could do it there, or the name. The other unique situation with comments, all other fields, if you type lowercase, it's going to change it to uppercase when you tab out of it. So if I did CO period here and I tab out of it, it changes it to uppercase. That's the case for all fields except for comments. Comments, because the fact that you could have so much information, it's a lot easier to read if you've got standard case, especially if you've got a lot of text. So we do allow upper and lower cases there. Otherwise, all other fields switch to uppercase, so you don't have to worry about the case. Sometimes we make use of buttons. So this particular function is a button that triggers to another screen. Just by clicking on it, it opens up that function. So that just happens to be our electronic ordering screen. If we go to the return tab, and I'll show this when we go through each of the modules. If you actually type the word same, it pulls in the order information. and then you could edit it to be for your returns information as well. Remittance information comes from accounts payable, rep information, customer account information. And then you'll notice the next three are grayed out fields. These are not things you can edit, but you can view. And one of the nice things about our system is that we've got an F9 function, or a double click. So if I was looking at this and I wanted to know more information about this purchase order, I can F9 or double click on it, and it's going to show me that purchase order and the items that were on the purchase order. I can actually even double click on a line item here, and now I'm looking at the purchase order detail, how it was actually distributed, the receiving information, if there was any, the invoice information. Let's see if I can't get something that has. So if I go drill down into this, I can see this is when it was received. I can actually click on the log to see who created the log and if there were any comments on it. That's a receiving log. The invoice information, I can actually, at this point, F9 or double click on the invoice to see what was actually entered in accounts payable. And if they had scanned documents, I could actually display the invoice at this point as well, to see what the actual paperwork that was received was. So I'm, about 4 levels in at this point, but that's, kind of a nice function. We have this information in multiple places. Obviously, we have this on the SKU as well, really on purchase orders, it's all over. This just happens to be on the vendor itself. Now, you can tell that a field can be drilled down on if down here at the bottom of the screen it says look F9. That means that you can drill down into that field. So if I click on a field that doesn't have that, I don't have that. The other fields going across the bottom of the screen, this is a user number. This is important for troubleshooting because what we do is we capture the last 15 commands that each user has done. So we can go back and look at what they've done, assuming that they've called support in a timely manner. We can see what they've done in the past. This is the username. So this is my username and what server I'm currently on. If you are in a required field, it will say required here. This is the name of the screen, which would be used if I was going to set this up as a shortcut. And then the section that I'm in, which really isn't very important, but if I do have a long line, a long list of items, this is important because it tells me this is line 8, this is line 9. So you've got that. The help file, some fields will actually have help information here. So here, this is an abbreviated version of the vendor's name, blah, 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 blah. But what we have is we have a online help system that when you're in a field, if you type F1, it opens up what we call VR help. And in VR help, you can then read additional information on it. Now, I don't have it set up that way because we'd have to have, multiple instances of VR help. So what I'm going to do is just bring it up manually so you can see what it looks like. So anytime we update the system, we update VR help with additional fields. So this is our VR help. So this is just using standard robo help. It's linked in. So if I clicked this from GM vendor maintenance, it would have taken me to GM vendor maintenance. It would have taken me right to this screen. And then what I can see here is there's tips of how to use this screen. There is pictures of the screen. Each one of the fields is just discussed, and then each one of the tabs. So if I wanted to see what information is on the order tab. and each field is documented. So this becomes very important. If we've got new information that's been added, so for instance, here in our release of 19.3, we added GM style classification feature. So it talks about that. And you can see here each of the different enhancements has a listing. So, and if it has new information on it, it has that little red star in the upper left-hand corner so that people can view that. What's really great about this is you can navigate the entire documentation just by expanding or collapsing the various fields. So you've got access to all of the documentation. We also have under here, we've got various procedural guides. So these go a little bit further than just, you know, explaining what each of the fields are on the screen. This is a little bit more like, well, you've done this, now you should do this, now you should do this, or this is the setup. So we've got several procedural guides here for the users to review. And you also have the ability to search this. So let's say you wanted to know more about style, for instance, you can search and it's going to show you all of the items that, you know, refer to style so that you can see that information. So each time we do a release, we release a new version of VR Help, and then folks have that available. We also do a release notes that shows all of the changes that we've made so that people can take advantage of the functionality. When you're done with the item, you have the choice of either escaping out and not saving any changes, which you can use the escape key, or you can use the close key, the close button, or you can use the X, and then it will ask you, do you want to save the changes you made? Because it wants to make sure you, if you did make changes, it wants to make sure you're either not saving them or that you are. If you are ready to save the changes, you've made changes and you want to save them, the standard key for that is F10. If you do F10, it saves the record. It's going to validate that everything that's required is filled in, and everything else that's required also meets any formatting requirements. You can also do save with the icon here. You can also do record save, or you can do Alt-RS. So there's multiple ways to save or exit. The important thing is when you save, it's going to require that all the required fields have been filled in. Even if you didn't change those fields, it's still going to validate that those fields are filled in. So you've got, so typically people would escape out if they didn't want to change, and F10 if they did. Pretty much anywhere in the system you can use F10 or save. There are a few places, about a handful, where you have to use F10 to save because there's no buttons on the screen. Okay, so that's sort of a look at the general navigation in the screen so far. Any questions at this point? Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to escape back, and I'm not going to save any of my changes that I made. It takes me back to this point. At this point, oh, is that a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a real quick question.
Yeah,
the notes that you're leaving within here, are these kind of like a global note where other users that could log in and see those notes as well?
Yeah, yep. Everything is a shared file. There isn't an ability to do like an individual user comment. So anything that I would put on this record would be available to everyone.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. The comments, now this is a vendor file, you know, so there's things like general comments, there's purchase order comments. These show up by default on purchase orders. There's return comments. These show up on chargebacks by default. But of course, you know, there's SKU comments, book comments. We have comments in a lot of places, and they're shared comments. Any other questions? So just a note about the design in general for the merchandise modules, text, trade, and GM. What we've tried to do is have sort of the same formatting. So we've got text, maintenance, inquiry, ordering, special orders, return, so on. And then trade, maintenance, inquiry, special orders, you know, transfers, returns. So it's the same general formatting, or the same general placement of items within the system. So maintenance are things where you're going in to change a record. While you're in maintenance, you have the record locked. So I don't have anything locked yet because I haven't actually chosen a SKU. I'm just doing a search. So once I have a SKU in maintenance here, this record is locked for exclusive use. If someone else tries to access this record, it's going to say this record is locked by such and such user, and it has their phone number and their email address. With our latest release, you can actually have it automatically send an email to that person saying, hey, someone tried to access a record that you currently have locked. If you're an inquiry, so if I go to the same thing under GM inquiry SKU and put in an item, this is not locked. This is just you know, displaying information. It's not actually locking it. So it doesn't, you're not changing anything at this point. And that's the case throughout our system. If you've got something open for update, it's locked. If you're just viewing it in inquiry mode, it's not. We've grouped all of the accounting functions together over here. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, general ledger, stock ledger are our main functions, and we're going to discuss all of those as we go forward over the next few weeks. Return checks we don't use anymore. That was the latest. That came over from our old system, so we won't be doing that. The benchmarking is the reporting tool. This is where we can report on the stock ledger and the general ledger at the same time. So those are all of the accounting functions. The text, this is all the text functions, and buyback functions are here. Link is our general communication tool. This is what we use to communicate between either the FTP vendors or the EDI vendors or PubNet vendors. All of that is controlled with what we call our link module. Trade, this is our trade books. You know, a lot of our clients don't have trade books anymore anyway, but this is where they would manage that. So it's separate than text or GM. GM, anything that's not a textbook or a trade book are in there. Physical inventory. So if you're doing just a sort of spot check, the physical inventory wouldn't be what you would use. This is designed to do an inventory of an entire class of merchandise, not just a smaller group. So this would be your year-end inventory or your cycle counts, any of those type of things. And continuing on, plan. This is our planning open to buy module. where buyers can actually plan what their purchases and sales are going to be for the next year and base their buying decisions on it. So that's all under the plan. Sales audit. This is where, so POS transactions occur throughout the day. When POS closes, those transactions go to sales audit. And this is where they're validated. They're validated for completeness. They're validated that all of the data exists, that the totals match, and all of that is done through sales audit. This is also where the journals are created for the general ledger for sales. All of that is here. Receiving, this is where the purchase orders are received. So it's central receiving. Whether it's created in text, trade, or GM, it's received within the receiving module. And we don't have anything specific by store. So a PO could have items on it for stores 1, 2, and 3. So we don't have a concept of one store, one receiving. It's a centralized receiving for all stores. And I'll talk about that quite a bit when we do the receiving module. CRM, this is where we can review customers' transactions, see all of their sales, refunds, buyback, anything that has a customer attached to them, we can view it here. We can drill down on it, reprint receipts, things like that. We can also notify the customer here with emails and, like that their special order is in, that type of thing. Order fulfillment, this is coming from anything that is created in our e-Raytex system. As soon as it's complete there, it drops into order fulfillment, and from that point, it's filled and shipped from the order fulfillment module. Report is our report generator. This actually creates, this is where you create reports under the generator and retrieve reports where you can run them. So users have access to that, the ability to run reports. We write reports for some users as well. It just sort of depends on the level of comfort that the user has with the report generator. Hotkeys I already referred to. My menu would be functions of where a user can see, for instance, their settings, their hotkeys, and then also whatever their print jobs are. Print jobs don't have to actually go to a printer. They can go to a hold queue and you can view them on the screen and choose to print them at that time or export them to Excel. Any report in the report generator can go to the screen or it automatically converts to Excel. User menu would be if a client had any custom menus. And then admin is sort of the general admin functions, and we've got a session set aside for that as well. And then the help, which just opens up the help file. So the Visual Raytex database uses a database called Universe. The Universe database sits on a Unix platform. I think all of our clients now use Red Hat, but the user should never really be down at that level. All of the functions that they do should be through these menus at this point. So that's what I have for a general overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions about what I covered, or just maybe if there was something you thought I was going to cover that I didn't, or any questions that you have really in general. I'd be happy to answer them. If you're asking a question, make sure you unmute. my favorite. Okay, excellent. Well, then we will, I believe textbooks is tomorrow. Textbooks will definitely take the full 90 minutes going into each of the functions and how our whole textbook system operates. As you can imagine, that's one of the places that's probably a core difference in the product. So my email address is kwbecker. I think you probably all have it from the invite. If you have any questions, kwbecker@raytex.com. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me those questions, and I will be happy to answer them. Thank you, everyone. I will let you know when the recording is ready. Yep. Bye.